Good evening. Welcome to Live United. We're very fortunate to have with us today John Round. John is our General Campaign Manager for the 2015 campaign that the United Way is managing right now. Before we launch into a lot of discussion around that campaign, I just want to remind our audience that oftentimes on the show we're really highlighting all of the programs, the efforts going on in the Monadnock region that make a difference in the lives of people. And I want to remind you that the campaign is what supports many, many of those programs. You also hear of programs on the show that aren't necessarily receiving United Way funding, but somehow partner with us to make a difference in people's lives. So John, I want to thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here, Kelly. Thank you.
Not an easy job to be the General Campaign Manager.
It is a big responsibility for sure, but it's been a great experience to this point, and we still have 3 months plus to go, and we have that $2,106,234 goal in mind, and we'll do everything we possibly can because, as you pointed out, the 49 partner agencies and programs are relying on us to raise that fund. So that's our goal, and we're going at it.
You know, and it's interesting because that campaign supports things from making sure kids have access to early childhood services, all the way to Meals on Wheels, Friendly Bus, so making sure people have transportation places, community kitchen, making sure all those basic needs are taken care of. Our last two shows prior to this talked about maternal child health and parenting and supporting parents, and the Keene Senior Center, and making sure that educational and recreational and social activities are available to all age groups. So we go the gamut from birth all the way through to our golden years.
Yeah, I mean, really, to sum it up, the easiest way to characterize the campaign is it's a campaign of hope. You mentioned each one of those programs, and that's really our partner agencies are providing hope to folks. In some cases, it's an acute situation. It might be a transition in their lives as they're moving from one point to hopefully a better one. In other cases, it's somebody who's dealing with a more chronic condition. But whatever that condition is, the agencies are out there providing direct services and providing hope to those individuals. So when we're out working in the campaign and we're trying to spread the message, that's what we're really spreading. It's a donation of dollars, but it's really more a donation of hope.
And I think we have to all remember that we're each touched by this somehow. We may not be a direct recipient of the service, but it could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be our neighbor. It can be pretty much anyone, and we never know when we may need those services.
Exactly, and we hear that. The personal stories are tremendous, and when they're able to be shared, it really does motivate our giving base. And clearly that's why the organizations, the businesses, the not-for-profits, and the individuals have supported the Monadnock United Way and the Community Chest before it for over 60 years. To set a $2.1 million goal for a community our size, a region the size of the Monadnock region, in many ways, it's people. When I meet people from other areas, they are shocked to hear that though we're at $1.25 million now, we're not done. And not only are we not done, but we still have over $800,000 to go.
And we know that in these times, people feel a little bit challenged around perhaps giving or donating. We know there's lots of ways people give. We have an incredible crew of volunteers involved with the campaign. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Certainly, we do. 100 plus employees, 100 plus volunteers in any given year. Important to differentiate an employee from a volunteer. With a small staff size, really 2 full-time United Way staffers that are dedicated to the campaign. We then rely on the work of over 100 volunteers each and every year. And while we're lucky enough to have a good group of people who are helping year after year after year, it also requires getting out there and finding the remainder to assist us, because the campaign's changing. That's one of our messages this year, is the ability to adapt. But our volunteer needs are as big, if not bigger than ever. And part of that is the changing landscape, which I hope we get a chance to talk about a little bit later on, in terms of the businesses and the organizations that have provided the perennial support to the United Way. But without the volunteers, we really couldn't do it. And again, each one of those people come with their own motivation. Many of them have either had direct access to services, they've needed them in the past, or as you mentioned, they've had a loved one or somebody that they know well who's needed these services. And that's why we talk about the programs and the agencies that the United Way campaign serves is the critical safety net. They are that set of services that provide people with that kind of help.
And what differentiates a United Way campaign perhaps from an appeal that a singular organization might be making?
Well, really, if you go back to the genesis of the United Way, that's the community chest, and the idea was, isn't it best if the partner agencies are out there actually providing the direct service? And not that that eliminates their need to do direct fundraising, but especially during some period of time, would it not make sense to allow them to free themselves up from those efforts to continue to improve and provide those services, and instead have another organization that would be the collective, funny word for you, of course, right? The collective supplier of funds in the fundraiser. So that's where it all started. That's the campaign as we've kept it. We really are stewards for the funds, not only the funds that the community gives to us, but those that we allocate out to the partner agencies and programs.
And really the United Way was built on that history of a one ask and stewardship of those dollars to have the most impact as possible here in the Monadnock region. You mentioned the changing landscape that's happening out there, and I think we're all aware that, you know, there's been tremendous impact on the economy. We have a different generation of young people coming along, maybe with passions that are a little bit different. So what's happening with the workplace campaign and perhaps leadership giving and some of those kinds of things?
Well, we can split it really up into a number of different categories in terms of change in our ability or our need to adapt to them. From an organizational, from a company standpoint, and that really having been our standard operating procedure was the employee campaign, the workplace campaign, with donations largely being collected through payroll deduction. So there was, and I talk about the old days we had one conversation with a human resources representative or perhaps the general manager or the president of an organization. We convinced them that it was a good idea not only for the community but for their organization and for their employees to conduct an employee campaign. Everything was done manually, so why on earth would you go out in 49 programs, allow them to come in and each individually fundraise, when instead, again, using our stewardship skills and our ability to take advantage of the one ask, the United Way could come in. We could make our presentations, we could conduct some fun activities, we could encourage people to give. They would fill out paper pledge forms, they'd hand those into the payroll office would process it, cut a check each month off to the United Way. Very manual, very easy to make the case for one ask. The change that we've had to adapt to in some cases is with technology, with the internet, it's very easy now to put 49 different agencies or 300 different agencies, all of them worthy causes, onto a site where employees can now pick and choose, and with the automated payroll systems and with electronic funds transfer now, to disseminate and distribute those dollars amongst that 300 odd or 50 odd programs is much easier for our organization. So now the United Way is having to adapt and say, what is it that we can do not to take away from any of those other partner agencies and programs or any other programs that are outside of the United Way's purview, but really to instead just continue to remind people why that one ask and the stewardship, those qualities are important. So from an organizational, from a company campaign standpoint, that's some of the adaptation that we've had to make. From an individual giving standpoint, the opportunities to give now are so many. And again, they're all worthwhile, and we've seen those in just the last few weeks. Not only is the United Way out there with a campaign, there are capital campaigns. You have other initiatives in town for either capital projects, new buildings, or it might be special campaigns for increased community involvement in this or that. And then, of course, we have the individuals who are out there. So we have family tragedy that is continuing to happen. And now with the ease of the internet, we set up a site. We can go ahead and raise thousands and thousands of dollars from a number of people who are touched by the story. So that impact investing or that impact donation is something else that we just have to be aware of because it's out there. And again, the choices are many. So it's really about messaging. It's about making sure that we are reinforcing with people the importance of the United Way dollars, not only to those partner agencies and programs, but what those services then mean to the community. So that's another way. You mentioned younger people and cultivating that generation of givers. What we've seen, and Dick Ober from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, when he joined us for a report breakfast a couple of weeks ago, he reinforced the fact that though New Hampshire oftentimes gets a bad rap when it comes to their charitable giving, once you take away a few categories like religious organizations, because New Hampshire and Vermont are the two least religious states when it comes to giving, certainly in the country, and then when you actually look at the number of people who do something, they give something, it may not be a large amount, it may only be a few dollars, but it's at least something, we actually jumped to 11th in the country, I believe was the number that Dick used. So when we see that, that's encouraging. But then what Dick went on to say is to also remind us that we have that bubble, and I think you just had Peg Monahan on from the Senior Center, and she was talking about how there's a growing population of older people in the state. Well, those people are also moving through their work lives, and now they're starting to retire. Those people have always been our biggest cheerleaders, our ambassadors in those organizations. We continue to hear stories that when people joined, and these are people now who have been in their organizations for sometimes 20 years, they can still remember their first day or their first week or their first year with somebody coming up to them and saying, it's really imperative that you give to the Monadnock United Way. This is what we do, this is what our organization is, this is who we are, it's how we define our region. So how do we now, with that retiring workforce, that bubble of people who are leaving, who are sometimes our best ambassadors, how do we go about continuing to share that message with that new generation if those voices are no longer within the organizations?
And I think one of the other challenges that I've certainly heard about is that we have a lot of mergers that have occurred over the years. You know, the decentralization almost of some of that leadership from the Monadnock region. So they may not understand some of the needs of the Monadnock region quite as well.
Right, and again, it's one of those where it's a wonderful message. We've heard from a number of these larger multi-state, in some cases multinational corporations that have large divisions in the area. That their charitable giving is at an all-time high, either on a per capita basis or just overall dollar basis. And so the message that becomes tricky is to share with those representatives who are so excited, as they should be, about those results, to remind them that may not have been the case regionally or locally. And so that is that delicate crafting of message, that conversation that has to happen one-on-one to remind them that while that's wonderful, it still can present problems or challenges for those of us who are working on the campaign, those volunteers. And therefore, if the campaign is not getting to its full goal, what does that mean for the partner agencies and programs? And therefore, what does that mean for the community?
One of the things I really want to highlight is that there's been a big effort this year around engaging small business, which makes up a large portion of the Monadnock region. But there's also a message in there. So we've done an incredible job of engaging that small business, and their giving has gone way beyond where it ever has before. But it takes a lot of those small businesses to make up for some of these big businesses that have decentralized or perhaps are no longer even in the region anymore.
Right. And when we refer to that as the order of magnitude, that it is, while it is wonderful, and we've continued to see, and unfortunately I'm not going to rattle off all of their names because I'm bound to forget so many of them, but the number of smaller organizations, the more locally controlled organizations, your Main Street businesses, some of your smaller manufacturers in the regions, the service organizations that are here, their giving has risen dramatically in the last couple of years because we realized that part of this adaptation that we have to do is there. It's within that sector of the economy. And when you've met with success for as long as the Monadnock United Way in the community chest before it had, it can be difficult sometimes to start and make sure that you're always keeping an eye on where your weaknesses or where your vulnerabilities are. And it meant that for the last 4 years, as we've not made goal, to be frank, we've not made goal for the last 4 years, that those vulnerabilities now are taking center stage. And so we're now addressing them, and we've been addressing them for those last 4 years as well as we've been able to. And part of that was with small employers. But as you mentioned, for every one small employer, or if I flip it around, for every one larger organization, a 500 employee company that has a 20% reduction in their campaign Well, that's going to take 15 to 20 small businesses, perhaps, to as many as 25 to try and make up for that. So that's a lot of conversations that we have to have. And as I said, there are 2 full-time staff members dedicated to the campaign and hundreds of volunteers under the old model. If we now look at the newer model, and this is what I'm talking about, since day one of the campaign, we have to do even better. We've always done well, but now we have to do even better. This even better model means more conversations, which either means more time or more volunteer effort.
So what's your message then to the individual donor out there? Not the businesses, not the workplaces, but that individual donor. How are they making a difference?
They're absolutely making a difference. We have 6,000 givers in the region, which is tremendous. Can we double that? We absolutely can. Would it still mean that we could double it yet again? Probably. There is no dollar amount that's too small, and that's probably the biggest concern that I hear from individual donors. Well, I can only give maybe a couple dollars a week. Great. Send those couple of dollars in each week, fill out something, fill out a pledge form, encourage your employer, if they're not currently doing a campaign, to do one. Because if you are giving a couple of dollars a week and we get those other 5,999 additional givers to do the same, we've moved a mountain. It doesn't have to be the large givers. And that is one of the other areas, and you had asked me about that earlier and I forgot to mention. Our leadership giving has been tremendous this year. People who have capacity, who have the ability and the interest, are not only giving to all of the other worthy causes, but they've also stepped up for the Monadnock United Way this year. We're up nearly 15% for those that have given. We still have another half of, so that's about 50% of all of our leadership givers. And just as a point of reference, leadership giving is defined as any individual who contributes $500, which works out to a little less than $10 a week to the campaign. So we've had about half of those givers from the past couple of years already commit. We know there are another half out there, and if we can leverage those same kind of results, that gives us a good, strong foothold. But that still will provide us with basically half. If all 800 plus of those folks come through at the levels they did last year, or even at slightly greater levels, we'll be halfway there. Where does the other half come from? Exactly the people who are giving $2, $5, to upwards of $10 a week. So it doesn't matter how much you feel you're able to give. The important part is saying yes and giving.
And I think that's a really important message. I also want to say that one of the new things available to people this year is that they can give online. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The Monadnock United Way has always had the opportunity to give online, but it has not always been the easiest process. Now we hope that through firstgiving.com, that we'll be able to really streamline that process, because we know people are out there on their smartphones, and if they're motivated because they just spoke with somebody who's needing services, or maybe they saw this program, they want to be able to respond and react immediately. So they can go to firstgiving.com, they can look at the Monadnock United Way page, or flip that over, go to MUW.org, our website, and on there, click on the Donate Now. Takes all of about 5 minutes to make a credit card contribution to the campaign. It's very simple, very easy, and an effective way. In fact, we just rolled out First Giving in late November. We had a December 2nd, which was Giving Tuesday. That was our goal, raise $10,000 online through First Giving. If we were able to do that, we would get a $10,000 match. We exceeded our goal. So really the success of that has given us a push for the future. We're working on now an additional match for any new and new and increased gifts. I guess they'd be improved as well if they're increased. And that will be in place to leverage, once again, bring new people in, figuring that if my $2 is not feeling like a lot of money, if there's a match that's going to match me dollar for dollar, it's really like giving $4. So take advantage of that when they can. So yeah, online has been a great new initiative for us.
So I really want to highlight this message about the individual donor, because I think a lot of people look at the United Way and they say, well, they get me in my workplace, or and if we're not getting you there, if we're not reaching you somehow through your work environment, I really encourage you to visit the United Way, MUW.org website, and see how you can connect with us and give to these, for 2015, 49 different programs serving birth through senior citizen age population here in the Monadnock region, making a huge difference. We're beginning to see some of the results of that work. We've been trying to highlight that this year. You know, just some incredible things happening. In a 6-month period, 375,000 services provided to people out there, specifically here in the Monadnock region. That's what you give to. Anything else you want our audience to know, John?
Really, just as you started to point out, the need is great. The need is continuing to increase. The services that are provided are of high quality. That's part of our job at the United Way, is to make sure that if we're committing your dollars, the community's dollars, to any partner agency or program, that they're delivering the quality of service that you would require. So rather than taking in 49 individual requests, you have an opportunity to give and to have it go to those 49 partner agencies and programs. If you'd rather designate 1 or 2 or as many as 5 to 10 organizations, you can do that as well. So you have that opportunity to give specifically if you so choose. But so many are willing to simply commit the dollars to the community, understanding that the Monadnock United Way, as stewards of those dollars, are disseminating them properly. We're looking for 5% more than we were able to raise last year through the campaign. That means that, as I said, we need to do even better than what we've done in the past. We can't stop. We have to continue to raise these funds. There are other efforts going on within the community that are going to be addressing the root cause, but the campaign is still there to provide that critical safety net of services for your neighbors and your friends, perhaps for you someday as you move through the spectrum. It could be that you become part of the Keene Senior Center, or your grandchildren are part of the maternal and child health program. So the campaign is ongoing. It'll be here through the first of the year into the beginning of 2015. Any contribution that you can make is appreciated. It's needed. Give, advocate. If you want to become a volunteer, we're always looking for new volunteers. Certainly another way to leverage your money is to recruit 5 or 10 friends, or just a couple of friends, or relatives to give to the campaign as well. There are so many ways to contribute, and we just thank you for your support. We've certainly been well served over the last 60 plus years. We want to continue to provide that support to the community, so thank you.
And John, I want to thank you because I started the show by saying not an easy job to do. The general campaign manager, just so you folks know, you give countless hours, and our volunteers give countless hours. I think we figured it out the other day, and the value per hour just for the campaign alone is over $140,000 in volunteer time that we receive, and that is priceless for the Monadnock region. It makes such a big difference, and you know, we can't thank you enough for taking the reins and being willing to lead the 2015 campaign. Want to really highlight that message that you have an opportunity to give, whether it's $1 or $2 or $10. Become a giver, and if you can't afford to do that and you'd like to volunteer, you can contact us about volunteering. The unique piece of the campaign is those dollars raised, then volunteers, a team of volunteers, decides how that money will actually go back out into the community to support these programs. So you have 6 full-time employees, but you have an array of volunteers, over 100 of them, making a difference out there in the Monadnock region.
If I may, Kelly, 99 cents of every dollar stay local. 88 cents of every dollar go to direct funding for those partner agencies and programs. That means only 1 cent on every dollar is actually going outside of the region, and that's our contribution to to United Way worldwide. The rest stays here. It supports the organization, it supports the stewardship efforts, and it also, again, 88 cents goes out directly to those partner agencies and programs. So if you're looking for the kind of, and we hear about that more and more, I want my dollars to stay local and I want my dollars to actually go to direct service, we can assure all of our givers that that's exactly what happens with any dollar that's given to the Monadnock United Way.
So again, John, thank you for being with us today. I want to remind you, audience, that you have an opportunity to give, to volunteer, to advocate. Please join us in Living United and as part of the 2015 campaign. Have a good night.